Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're diving straight into a massive, highly anticipated publication from the New England Journal of Medicine. We're looking at the SONIA trial. This is a genuinely pragmatic study analyzing the impact of glucocorticoids on community-acquired pneumonia, specifically in low-resource settings. So, if you're a healthcare professional or a global health advocate, you absolutely need to know about this one because it tackles a major killer head-on using tools that are actually accessible. Let's dive in.
Here's our quick roadmap for today. We'll cover 1. The pneumonia problem, 2. The SONIA trial design, 3. Who participated, 4. The survival results, 5. Safety and side effects, and finally, 6. Global health impact.
Section 1. The pneumonia problem, high stakes in sub-Saharan Africa.
So, we all know community-acquired pneumonia is a leading cause of complications and death worldwide. But the burden? It is definitely not equal. In sub-Saharan Africa, the case fatality rate is literally 3 to 5 times higher than what we see in high-income countries. And what makes that statistic just staggering is that it's happening despite a markedly younger average patient age. We're talking about an aggressive, high-mortality crisis that is striking down young adults.
Now, you might be thinking, don't we already use adjunctive glucocorticoids? Steroid hormones that dial down the immune system's inflammation for severe pneumonia? Yes. In well-resourced ICUs, they've shown incredible mortality benefits. But here was the massive blind spot. The medical community urgently needed to know, could these exact same, super cheap, widely available drugs save lives in low-resource settings? Places where patients are treated on general wards, not in fully equipped ICUs.
That brings us to Section 2, the SONIA trial design, a pragmatic approach.
This brings us to the actual architecture of the SONIA trial, which spanned 18 public hospitals across Kenya. What makes this study a real game changer is how it deliberately ditches the playbook of previous high-income trials. You know the ones. Older populations, 1 million strict exclusions, high-tech ICUs. The SONIA trial, however, embraced the messy, pragmatic reality of low-resource healthcare. We're talking severely limited diagnostic capacity, a shortage of ICU beds, late hospital presentations, and patients battling coexisting illnesses like HIV and TB. It is a trial built for the real world. To navigate that reality, the researchers kept the methodology incredibly straightforward. No billion-dollar tech required here. They just identified adults with pneumonia who arrived within 48 hours of admission and randomized them 1-to-1. Half got standard antibiotic care. The other half got standard care plus a 10-day course of locally available, low-dose oral glucocorticoids. The ultimate goal? Track 30-day all-cause mortality.
Moving to Section 3. Who participated? Rigorous screening and enrollment.
To really grasp the power of this data, we have to look at the sheer scale of the enrollment. The screening effort was monumental. Investigators meticulously screened over 46,000 ward admissions. They filtered out anyone who didn't strictly meet the criteria or already needed steroids for something else, ultimately isolating 2,180 eligible patients. That massive filtering funnel ensures the high integrity of the two groups we're looking at.
When we look at who actually made it into the trial, the population genuinely reflected local realities. The median age was 53, pretty evenly split between men and women. But get this. Nearly 40% of these patients arrived at the hospital already exhibiting low blood oxygen, and about 16% had a coexisting HIV infection. And perhaps the most mind-blowing stat, overall ICU transfers during the whole trial were a mere 0.2%. Make no mistake, this is ward-level medicine in its purest form.
All right, Section 4, the survival results, divergent curves.
Let's get to the moment of truth, the primary outcome the global health community was waiting for. Death from any cause at 30 days. The hazard ratio came in at 0.84. Put simply, this represents a statistically significant lower risk of death for the patients who got the adjunctive steroids compared to standard care alone. Bottom line, the intervention worked.
When you map this out on the cumulative risk curve, the impact is undeniable. You can visually trace the mortality rate splitting within just the first few days. By day 30, we're looking at 22.6% mortality in the glucocorticoid group versus 26.0% in standard care. Now, obviously, both those numbers highlight just how lethal pneumonia is in this setting. But that gap represents actual lives saved by an incredibly cheap oral pill.
And here's the really cool part. This subgroup analysis shows the survival benefit wasn't just a fluke for one specific type of patient. The data holds up across multiple demographics.
Whether patients were male or female, younger or older, or whether they walked in with varying baseline oxygen saturation levels, the trend consistently favored adding the glucocorticoids.
Section 5. Safety and side effects, weighing the risks.
But look, we all know efficacy is only half the story in clinical research, right? You always have to weigh it against the risk of adverse events, especially in places without intense high-tech monitoring. Well, the safety data here is super reassuring. Out of the 1,089 patients in the steroid group, only 5, that is literally 0.5%, experienced a serious adverse event possibly linked to the steroids. For a population this sick, that is an exceptionally low rate.
Looking at the broader safety profile of all 385 reported adverse events across the entire trial, the vast majority were totally manageable. Over half were mild, about 43% were moderate, and severe events made up just under 5% of the total.
Now, that's not to say there were zero side effects. The intervention was safe, but it came with expected clinical realities. Roughly 16% of the steroid group experienced hyperglycemia, elevated blood sugar, which we know steroids do. Pulmonary TB was also noted in about 16% of the steroid group's adverse events. So the huge takeaway here, directly from the authors, is this. If you're going to implement this protocol, your healthcare facility absolutely must have the capacity to monitor patient blood glucose levels.
Finally, Section 6, Global Health Impact, Redefining Standard Care.
Let's step back and look at the big picture. What does the SONIA trial actually mean for millions of patients? Well, the researchers concluded that because this was a truly pragmatic, real-world trial, these findings aren't just academic theory. These highly accessible, low-cost oral steroids are a viable, completely scalable intervention to reduce case fatalities in sub-Saharan Africa right now. You don't need a billion-dollar hospital wing, you just need an updated protocol and some basic monitoring.
Which leaves us with a massive question for the future of global public health. With this undeniable evidence now published in the New England Journal of Medicine, how quickly will international guidelines actually adapt? How long will it take to ensure this life-saving protocol reaches the low-resource hospitals that desperately need it? The evidence is here. The next step is action. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer on the SONIA trial. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next one.